Angel on the track.
What's up guys, welcome back to the vlog. Oh my goodness, wow, that's bright. Today I'm gonna do something a little bit different, and instead of playing at the Wynn, which is still probably my favorite poker room, I'm gonna be going to a new-ish casino called Horseshoe. I say new-ish because it used to be Bally's, they just changed the name and like remodeled it and stuff, and hopefully we can get a seat into the 3-5 game. Haven't played anything past like 1-2 there if I remember correctly. So yeah, that should be interesting, and we will get a new poker chip for the collection, even though I technically have already been to that room. But first, let's get lunch. I get to the Horseshoe Poker Room at around 5 p.m. It was redesigned in 2022, and there's now a Hall of Fame outside the poker room with all the winners of past World Series of Poker main events. For some reason, I'm not able to find myself on there. It must have been a mistake from one of the staff members. Unfortunately, there were no 3-5 games running. I get an open seat at the 1-3 game before shortly moving to 2-3, where the max buy-in is 500. In the first notable hand, I've got Queen Jack of clubs on the button. There are 3 limps, and I make it $15. All 3 limpers call, so 4 ways to a flop of 10-5 deuce with 2 clubs. We have a flush draw, 2 overs, and all kinds of backdoor straight draws available. So when action checks to me, I'm definitely putting out a bet here. I make it $25, and only the early position and low jack players call. The turn brings the 4 of clubs. We make the flush in our first hand. Action checks to me once again, and I ended up betting 45 here. It says in my notes I wanted to target top pair, but I don't like this bet. I definitely should bet bigger here. I don't think it really makes sense to bet small and then get a call from something like top pair, only to have them fold river. I should just try to get value while I'm ahead. But as played, I end up getting a call from only the early position player, so we are now heads up, and the river brings the 9 of clubs, putting 4 clubs on the board. Not something I like to see, not because I'm worried about my hand not being best, but because this is definitely going to scare any non-flush hands. The early position player actually decides to bet this time, but only makes it $25, so this is almost certainly just a blocker bet, and he wants to get to a cheap river, but I don't think I really have any reason to raise. I ended up snap calling here because raising will not get value from worse, and in the off chance that my opponent's capable of micro betting to induce a raise from me if he has the ace of clubs, I don't want to re-raise here and get jammed on or something, so I decide to just call, and he ends up having pocket tens for a flopped set. So not what I expected to see given how he played it, but we are going to win this first one, although I do think I lost some value here.
37 years.
So the house cost you
$15,000.
I was gonna say.
I built it myself.
In this next hand, I have ace-jack offsuit in the small blind. Action folds all the way to me, and I ask the big blind if he wants to play or chop. He wants to play, so I go ahead and raise it to $12. Very happy to have ace-jack here, blind versus blind, and he ends up just calling. We're going to a flop, which comes ace 4-6 with 2 diamonds. Great flop for my hand. I put out a c-bet here of $15. Probably can make it smaller, but I think it's fine. He ends up calling, and the turn brings the 5 of hearts. So the board's a little more coordinated, and given that it's blind versus blind, he definitely could have a straight here already. I'm not too worried about that though, and all I can really think about is how to get as much value as possible. I think of betting big here because I think that this opponent will be pretty inelastic and will call a big bet with any hand that he's deciding to continue with. But I noticed that he's pretty short stacked. I decided to bet 35 here, and that would leave him with $70 left behind on the river if he were to call, which would make for a okay sized bet on the river to put them all in. But I think this is a mistake, and as one of my friends Chris pointed out, it's probably better to just focus on getting more value now rather than overcomplicating it and thinking about SPR on the river and stuff. So I think this hand could have been played better in hindsight. He ends up calling the $35 bet, and the river brings the jack of diamonds here. So we now have 2 pair, and the flush completes. So kind of interesting, but I figure I can easily get value from worst two pairs, even something like ace 10 or so. So I just put them all in here, and he ends up folding. We win another hand, but again, it's a situation where I think I still could have gotten a tiny bit more value. After this hand, the player to my right, who was from Russia, notices that I was vlogging, and he started talking and also mentioned that he wanted to try to get in a hand against me to make it into the vlog.
If I blogging, can I post in the
No, people ask all the time, yeah.
I think
If we get in a hand, you can be in it. For this next hand, the Russian player is in under the gun and decides to limp. I'm in under the gun +1 with ace queen offsuit. I make it 12. Action folds to the big blind. He calls, and the under the gun limper calls as well. So we're getting into a hand against two other players, and the flop comes down 4-7-6 with 3 spades. Not the flop we wanted to see. All we have is 2 overs on a board with a possible flush. So once the big blind and under the gun player check, I decide to check back. The turn brings the ace of diamonds. We now have top pair here, and the big blind now decides to bet $20, and under the gun raises to $45, which is a tiny raise, and I don't really know what this means, but at the same time, raising on a board like this seems pretty strong. Still though, I know he does want to be in the vlog, and I do have a very strong top pair here. I ended up flatting after thinking for a bit, and the big blind calls as well. In hindsight, I think I could definitely just fold and wait for a better spot, even though it might seem a tiny bit tight. It's just weird to just call with ace queen here, which is always going to be behind the under the gun player's value range, unless he's just crazy, but I think I could just wait for a better spot. The river is the jack of spades, putting 4 spades on the board. Very unfortunate run out for us. I am now wishing I had folded on the turn. The big blind checks here, and unsurprisingly, the Russian player bets $50. Very easy fold here. I let it go, and so does the big blind. And the under the gun player shows nice hand. Yeah. I had an ace, so show the. Oh, nice. Much better.
Very nice.
Ace deuce of spades for a flopped flush. He was ahead the entire time. We're going to lose this hand, but it's nice that this opponent was able to get into the vlog, so congrats to you. I have king jack of hearts for this next one, and I'm in the cutoff. The player in the low jack limps, and this guy, guys, was pretty crazy. He would get into multi-way hands, and the pot would be maybe like $20, a limps pot or something, and he would bet like $90 out of nowhere. So this guy definitely was an action player. We want to get involved. I make it $15. Action folds back to him, and he limp re-raises to $38. A very specific amount, but I end up calling here. Normally limp re-raises tend to be very strong, but I think this player could very well have something just completely random, so we're just going to see a flop and see what happens. The flop comes down 9-8 king rainbow, so we've got top pair here and some backdoor straight draws. My opponent checks to me, which is a good sign here. I decide to bet $30 here for value, and he makes the call. The turn is the 3 of spades, completing the rainbow. Shouldn't have changed anything, and now he decides to lead out, betting $80, which so far his line seems really strange, but I absolutely cannot fold. We have an easy call here, and the river brings the 5 of hearts. Very dry run out. I don't think anything should have changed, and once he bets 145, which is less than half pot, I have a very easy call. I have no idea what he has, but we are definitely not folding top pair. So I make the call, and he turns over pocket aces. Yeah, so his limp re-raise actually was strong. He decided to play it kind of weirdly, and I think he probably could have gotten some more value from me, but we're going to lose a decent sized one here. Not really much to say about this hand. I think it was fairly standard, but this is what I get for calling a limp re-raise with king jack of hearts. My opponent from the last hand is now in under the gun, and he straddles for $6. I'm in the low jack, and when action's on me, I open it up to $20 with ace jack of clubs. Action folds back to the straddler, and he calls and also checks dark. So we're going to a flop heads up. It comes down 4 queen 8 rainbow. I put out a small bet of $15, hoping to get a fold. Unfortunately, he makes the call. The turn brings the 10 of diamonds, and this isn't going to be a good card for my range, and even though I do pick up equity, I decide I'm going to slow down here. So I just check, and my opponent checks back. The river is the king of hearts. We river the nut straight, guys. My opponent checks to me again, and I don't think he's going to be strong here because he usually plays so active and bets really big and stuff, so Given the passive way we both played the hand, I don't think he's really going to have much here, and I just decided to bet exactly pot, which is 75, hoping that he might see this as me just trying to steal the pot. He doesn't fold right away, which is good, and he starts thinking out loud for a bit. He talks to himself for a bit and seems like he's gonna call, but eventually he makes the correct fold. So we unfortunately just can't get value from the action player, even with the nuts. Eventually this player gets involved in an all-in hand against another player, and he's in a tough spot on the river facing an all-in, and after less than a minute of thinking, he calls the clock on himself. He eventually calls the all-in and ends up losing, and the lady who took all the chips from him ends up leaving shortly after with all his chips. With the biggest action player gone, we unfortunately missed an opportunity to potentially take a stack. We're just going to have to hope for a good spot against the rest of the players at this table. We get a good opportunity when I pick up pocket aces in early position. I'm in under the gun +1 and I open it up to $12. I get called by the low jack and both of the blinds. So 4 ways to a flop here of 6-6 queen rainbow. Should be a good flop for us, hoping nobody has a 6 obviously. The blinds check to me, I bet small here making it 15, and the player in the low jack min raises to $30. Once the blinds get out of the way, I obviously decide to flat here. The turn brings these 6 of hearts, which I'm happy about since it's way less likely my opponent has a 6, and if he does, it's just a cooler here. There aren't really many bluffs my opponent should have on this kind of flop, and with the turn bringing another 6, I'm pretty much just putting my opponent on Queen X, which is really good for us since it's simply going to be boat over boat, and to get away, he's going to have to put me squarely on aces or kings. I check to my opponent hoping for a bet, and he obliges with a bet of $20, so very small here, and we want to get some more value here. I bump it up to $80, and once I do this, my opponent kind of rambles for a bit about me potentially having a 6.
What's that? 80? Yes, sir.
And after a long tank and while of shuffling his cards, he eventually makes the call. I doubt he's Hollywooding here with quads, but even if he is, it's not really going to matter. We're going to get the money in with our stack sizes being as they are. And once we get to the river card, which is the 7 of diamonds, it's completely irrelevant. And I do something that I really don't like here in hindsight. I bet 115, which I absolutely hate, even though it might not seem that bad on the surface. He makes the call, and once I show aces, he shows that he had king queen for what I expected, which was 6s full of queens. And the reason I hate my small bet is because this is just a perfect opportunity to overbet. I'm always able to have aces, kings, ace queen, potentially pocket queens, whereas my opponent can only realistically have like queen X and maybe a 6, which is very unlikely. So I absolutely should just overbet shove for value here. As I said earlier, it's simply very difficult for my opponents to fold a queen here. They'd have to put me on aces, kings, or pocket queens. I really don't like my bet sizing for this hand, and out of all the hands this session, this one is probably the worst offender in terms of missing value. That's pretty much it for the interesting hands. I have a couple more just to end off the vlog. I've got ace queen on the button, and I raised to $15 over 2 limps. The player in the small blind calls, and the under the gun limper calls as well. The flop is 7-5 ace. We have top pair and what essentially should be top kicker, considering there was no 3-bet. And the small blind makes it very easy for me and just shoves his remaining 110 into the pot. The under the gun player folds, and we have an easy snap call. The run out is the 8 of clubs and the 8 of diamonds. And my opponent ends up having ace 3. We both have 2 pair and my kicker plays, so a quick little $200 pot. And finally, to end off the vlog, I've got pocket 5s in the cutoff. I raise it up to 12 and the big blind calls. We flop a set on queen jack 5 all hearts. The big blind checks, I bet 15 and get check raised to 50. I flat obviously, and then the turn is the 9 of hearts, and the big blind just shoves for almost 3 times pot. I let it go, and he shows 4 deuce of hearts for a flopped flush. We end on a small loss after this hand, and as much as I would have liked to play longer and try to go for a win, I still hadn't gotten dinner, and Nacho Daddy was about to close. Alright guys, in for 820 and out for 704. Session started off okay. I think I was up a little bit. Lost that big hand with when I had the top pair with the king, and then from there just started kind of going downhill. I was up back to even after one of the hands, and then I kept playing and just couldn't get anything going. Just like raising pre-flop, folding, calling pre-flop, having to fold. Yeah, just wasn't my day today, but it was a small loss and we're still up on the trip. I played about 7 hours and it is currently 1:13 a.m. Gonna go to Nacho Daddy before it closes. So guys, with me I have nachos. So yeah, we got a nice little dinner here. Oh, damn it, I forgot to turn off the fan this whole time. But that is gonna be it for this vlog, guys. Hopefully we can have a better session tomorrow, and yeah, I will see you guys then. Peace.